Good afternoon, Europe and Middle East. Good evening, Asia, and good night, America. I have the pleasure and honor to be talking to Chana Levitan, a couples therapist, educator, speaker, and author. Welcome to the podcast, Chana.
Thank you, Francesco. Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So I just want to go through your bio briefly, and it will be in the description as well. You are a couple therapist, educator, speaker, and author with over 30 years of teaching and counseling experience. In addition to training therapists at the Neve Family Institute in Jerusalem, she works with couples in a private practice in Jerusalem and lectures frequently on the topics of dating, relationships, and marriage. Chana's best-selling book, I Only Want to Get Married Once, Grand Central Publishing, is a clear and practical guide to choosing the right marriage partner. So specifically today, we will talk about your couples counseling or relationship therapy work, which is something the two of us have in common.
Yes. So what are you seeing in your practice that is particularly troubling to your couples?
Yes, I see that the trends that I see is that women get in touch, and I feel like I work mostly with heterosexual couples, I must say, and often it is women that feel there is a pressing need to do something to improve their relationship, and men tend to follow along. And I find that is mostly women, again, consider very seriously and sometimes do go for divorce or separation. And the big crises tend to be when the first baby is born. That's when I get contacted most frequently.
Yes, it's one of the biggest causes for divorce. It sounds crazy. Yeah, it shakes things up a lot.
Relationships or the marriage institution or the relationships in general in crisis, do you feel?
Well, I think that there's so much confusion these days as to, what is a relationship, what is a marriage. Marriage is going out of style. The whole institution of marriage is really being attacked from every front. And it, honestly, as I think we're two people who are married, I think, we can admit and talk about the fact that marriage is challenging. I mean, it is challenging. And I get why so many people are struggling. And certainly my husband and I, in our almost 35 years together, have had our challenges. And again, like, how is it that a couple can really get through these challenges and really come out all the better? Because that is obviously the goal, and many couples lose their way on this path. Okay, now the path of a good marriage and getting there is phenomenal, and it is so precious. But again, there are many pitfalls that could happen along the way, and one of them is the first child, or if not the first, then the second or the third, or not being able to conceive. I mean, there's so many things that can happen, and every couple is going to have their mix of challenges that are going to come upon them. Okay, some of the challenges are from within in terms of communication or different expectations, and some of the challenges that we're going to go through are coming from without, like in-law challenges, financial struggles, getting, laid off at work, or, whatever it is. And actually, I'm filing now my third book, which is all about couples in long-term relationships, in long-term marriages. What is it that helped them to get over these bumps that so often trip couples up and lead to divorce or separation or parallel lives? So what are the secrets really for the couples who are able to make it? And it's really exciting to be doing these interviews, lots and lots of couples sharing their stories, and there are a lot of commonalities in the couples that are really making it, which is interesting.
Yes, what came up for me when I heard you saying about if the challenge that breaks a couple or that might break a couple is not the first child, it could be the second, the third, also of all these challenges. And so what came up for me was maybe the difference now is that the resilience is there is less resilience because it just many of the couples that I witnessed don't even get to the second child. It's the first one. And however, it's not just the resilience. If you feel like you're on the same page in terms of values, then you will find the resilience within you to overcome this challenge. So maybe it would be a good idea to talk about values before we talk about resilience.
Yes, fantastic. Because seriously, if a couple do share basic values, then it is the biggest anchor for their relationship and for the success, which is why, my book, my first book, I Only Want to Get Married Once, that's why I talk a lot about shared values, because we can't share all values. Okay. I mean, we all have, let's say, a list of 50 values that we really believe in, but we need to get in touch with what our top, let's say, 5 values are. And that's why I always suggest when a couple's dating, check that those top values are matching up, because there are going to be other values that are going to come up that are not going to match. So once you've got a basis, a foundation of those basic values, then the differences, the different opinions, you're going to work it through, right? You're going to be able to negotiate. You're going to be able to compromise on different things. Okay. So the couples that struggle the most are the ones that never checked their values in the first place. That's tough.
The Western world, I'm based in London. I grew up in Italy, the Western world. But in the world that I grew up in, shall I say, there is an assumption that we share the same values if we are from the West, I guess. But the West these days is a mix of so many different traditions.
Or lack of traditions.
Or lack of traditions. Yeah, I mean, whereby there's a lack of tradition that's been replaced by liberal values, beliefs in individualism, freedom of choice. They are values as well, aren't they?
Of course. Yeah.
But we don't check with each other early enough. At least in my practice, I find myself feeling, oh, I wish I could work with these couples a few years ago when they didn't have those conversations about what each other's values were.
Yeah. So look, if we can catch a couple before they make the commitment, then we can help them have those discussions. Okay. Years ago, there was an article in the New York Times entitled "Love You, Now the Difficult Stuff," all about, people running to get married before discussing the most important values. And so a couple who, for example, are both Christians, but they never talked about exactly where they're at in the religion or how they want to bring up their kids. And I know this particular couple who were together for a couple of years, and they both knew they wanted to have kids. And after they got married, so he's like, hey, what about kids? What do you say? I can't wait to take my kids to church. And his wife was like, church? What do you mean? Like, we never spoke about religion. I don't want to take my kids to church. And he's like, but what do you mean? Like, I thought we're both Christians and and she said, no, that's not my vision. He said, but my favorite memories are when I would go to church as a child. So and they almost got divorced over this. Why didn't they talk about it ahead of time? It was such a big part of his life and not a big part of her life. But again, these are some of the issues that couples are having because they're not having these discussions. So again, a couple, if we catch them early enough, we're going to help them have the discussion. If we catch them after they're ready, made the commitment. So what we want to do is to really try to help them find the values that they do have in common. And hopefully they'll be able to find, a couple that they do have in common. Even just believing in marriage is a value, right? If you got married, so do you believe in marriage? Okay, not everyone getting married believes in marriage. So that's like, if we're talking about how society has changed, that's one of the changes that we're experiencing. But again, helping a couple to find the shared values and identify them, that is, I think, one of the most important things we can do to help them to feel, okay, there is this safety, there is this security in the relationship, and then they can appreciate their differences or negotiate their differences. Okay, because almost no two people in a couple have the same exact vision of how to bring kids up. Right. So, okay, you checked out. You both want to have kids. You both want to bring them up. Maybe even a certain style. But even within that, you're going to have a difference of opinions about how to bring kids up. Just like we're going to have a difference of opinions about whether it's cold in the room or it's hot in the room. So what do you do? And this is where the relationship is. This is where the relationship happens. How do you negotiate? How do you communicate? How do you feel what the other person's feeling and take their reality into account together with yours? Okay, because there's a tendency to either nullify our reality or nullify the other person's. And emotional maturity, and this is what we're trying to help our couples develop, is to be able to hold on to both. This is how I feel. This is how you feel. Let me hold both of those. And I think that is the key that so many people are lacking today, the maturity and the resilience and that level of differentiation to be able to hold both.
Yes, and the opportunities and which forum can facilitate those discussions. I feel like humans, we tend to do what our peers do. So I want to put these two examples on the table. I grew up in a Catholic world, so I've been aware that people used to prepare for marriage with the church. And it was very clear because, you know, what your expectations and boundaries were about being a woman, a man, a wife, a husband, a co-parent, a father, a mother. What was a fair expectation? Everything, sort of the boundaries were clear. Different examples, particularly when I speak with colleagues who work with, upper middle class or upper class clients, it's quite common to prepare for marriage. So even completely non-religious but wealthy individuals, fortunately, there is some people who are getting acquainted to prepare. Of course, it's much more sophisticated to prepare a couple that's non-religious and non-traditional, because there isn't hundreds and hundreds of historical values to refer to, and you can just copy your parents, copy your grandparents, grandparents, and what you read in books. But nevertheless, with a therapist like one of us, these couples, non-traditional couples, can prepare. I think you and I were having a chat beforehand. The sophistication of differences, it's outstanding, because one person can be pro-abortion or political views, and there's so much in the mix. Should we bring the kids to church? Is one of them.
Yeah. A lot of discrepancy, and there's a lot of room for so many different opinions. And I think these days anything goes. Every value has been questioned. So when you're talking about two people getting together and sharing values, the possibilities of values and what people believe in has just multiplied so many times, which makes it more complicated and more complex and more difficult to really find somebody who you're on the same page with.
Yes. So I suppose my slightly Marxist comment would be perhaps tradition and religion would be of support, particularly to working class backgrounds, because again, the more liberal couples these days seem to engage in preparation for marriage or preparation for a long-term relationship more than those who couldn't afford, because it's normal. Your peers do it, I'll do it. But in other backgrounds, it's alien. You engage with somebody, you have a first child, and then all of a sudden you find that your values are very different and were undiscussed.
Right. So, but then again, look, there are a lot of really good courses for secular couples, also like prep, online prepare to help couples before they get married, to prepare themselves to check certain things out. But
Yes.
again, many people just think they don't need it. People think, what's the big deal? I mean, I also thought before I got married, I thought, marriage, why are these people suffering, struggling? Like marriage can't be that hard, can't be that much work. And then you get married and you realize, wow, it's a lot of work on oneself, on one's ego, to get out of the way, we're confronted with all of our young parts and all of our stuff. And it's a real wake-up call to be who we can be. And it's a challenge. It's a big challenge. So we can prepare people as much as we can, but at the end of the day, until people are married, they don't know what it is, right? So I think the preparation is values, basic values, some basic stuff on communication. And I think the most important preparation for marriage and for long-term love is working on our stuff and unpacking our childhood baggage, healing our traumas or whatever we've been through, because that's the stuff that's going to get in the way. And as soon as we get married, that stuff shoots to the surface. So yeah, being that we're all more complex today and life is more complicated and we've all gone through probably more stuff than past generations. So a lot of the preparation is also emotional preparation, and just making sure that we've done enough inner work emotionally and psychologically so that we can own our stuff once we get married and work on it and deal with it rather than run away.
You wrote on dating as well. What came up for me listening to you right now is how the contrast between the dating phase sometimes is still sort of Disney-like. It's like if I judge it from what the feedback I get afterwards is, I often hear, you used to make me feel very special and you would listen to me. You had lots of time for me. You were thoughtful and attentive and had so much initiative. And then you stopped. So this dating is somewhat, I don't know, is it somewhat fake or superficial? And because people do even more than they are prepared to do for the rest of their lives, and then actually you're having a first child, and what a contrast to dating when you were made feel so special.
Yeah, well, I talk a lot in my first book about dating, about infatuation, and how we go through that stage of infatuation, and we all do. And during that stage, there's a lot more energy and chemistry, and it's very, it fools us in terms of who the other person is and who we are as well. Because when we're infatuated with someone, we're also infatuated with ourselves and the way we feel about it, the way they make us feel. And so it's so important to educate also people to understand that infatuation stage is going to run out of gas. And therefore, while they're dating, they should be looking for the things that are necessary. And I always say there's 5 things that are really necessary for lasting love: shared values, healthy boundaries, mutual respect, mutual trust, and good communication. So those are the things that have to be checked, because after the honeymoon phase and all of that starts to fade, and it will, because it's only going to last, that chemical concoction has been proven to only last 2 or 3 years max. So then a couple's going to have to develop love, choose love.
Yes.
And it's very different than the effortless infatuation, right? So I think, that's when I first put out my book. It was 13 years ago, and I was talking so much about love, infatuation, and I thought, this is going to get old. People are going to get it. People understand it. And this topic of love, infatuation is going to get old. And I'm shocked to see that it not only has it not gotten old, but people are even more confused about it. And again, we're indoctrinated by movies. That's how we get most of our education about what love is, right? We get the movie. Right? There's so much infatuation, and it's just a 2.5 hour or 2 hour or whatever it is movie, And we're really, in a sense, brainwashed to think that that's what love is, and that's how it should be, and it should be easy, and it should be fun, it should be delirious.
Yes, easy and fun. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, how could you blame people? We're growing up on that stuff, and then we get married, and we're like, what's going on here? So it's just gotten worse. And really, that's what I'm saying. It's only gotten worse, and it's continuing to get worse. And people are so sure that feeling in their stomach is love. No, it's not. And we can have that feeling with our perfect, amazing life partner for us, and not perfect, but the ideal, someone who's a healthy life partner for us. We can have that feeling, and we can also have that feeling in our stomach with someone who would be the worst possible life partner for us. So, these are the messages that Hollywood is not sending out there and needs to.
A lot of the infidelity that I witness in my practice could be explained with falling for somebody who makes me feel like I was feeling during the honeymoon phase with my husband or wife. It's like you say, we grow up with these movies, and it's not just that we grow up, we are wealthy enough these days to be able to have the lifestyle of the actors and actresses we watch, and our peers are doing the same. So it's everywhere. What strikes me is that in theory, I feel like most of the people I work with, most of the couples I work with, they think they believe in marriage or long-term relationships. But marriage is very different than the honeymoon phase, because that, like you said, biologically, and thank you for bringing the biological piece in, only lasts 3 years. So if you are you sure you believe in marriage? Then you better prepare for it.
Yeah, I think that's part of the thing. It's like, I believe in marriage. Well, like, how many people are really thinking about that? And like, some people think they believe in marriage, but they haven't really thought it out. And so there's so many anti-marriage messages that are also coming in, and we're bombarded with so many other choices. And so I think
indirectly, do you think through advertisements and movies?
Well, also just you're scrolling through TikTok or YouTube, and I was just looking through, like, there were these YouTube shorts, and Dave Chappelle said, and he's married, but he was saying some things about marriage that were, like, pretty negative. And like, you hear the stuff. We are bombarded with all of this stuff, and it's confusing. And so people, even when people say, oh yeah, sure, I believe in marriage, not a lot of people have really thought that out. And so when they're faced with opposing views or their own issues in their marriage, and then they're like, oh yeah, marriage stinks, marriage is old, it's ancient. So then it also confuses them. So I just think that we need to educate, as much as Hollywood is educating the other way. There need to be enough people who are really talking about the importance of lasting love, what it takes to build it, what commitment really is, why it's worth it, which is why, as I said, I'm writing my 3rd book, because so few people have seen a good marriage. It's like, so you can believe in marriage, but then it's like, well, what is it really? I mean, I grew up in a home where my parents, they were trying, they're both on second marriages, and they were trying. They really were. And it was during the days where there wasn't so much, couples therapy was just in its, infancy. And they just couldn't figure it out. They stayed married, but it was horrendous, and it's not growing up, seeing a good marriage. I had to figure it out on my own. And that took a lot. That took a lot of work internally. It took a lot of speaking to people and reading books and sticking with it. And it's so much harder. It's so much harder when you don't see it. So that's why I'm writing this book. It's interviewing couples in good marriages, people who've really made it work, and who will serve as role models. And like, you believe it. Like, it's like, when you see it, you believe it, right? When you see a couple, and each of these couples are talking about crises or difficulties that they've been through. It's not a Pollyanna book. It's like, okay, let's get real. What have you worked through? What have you had to do? And why is it worth it? And what is so beautiful about that lasting marriage, right? What's so beautiful about it? And really, really, get real on both ends, what's difficult and also what's beautiful and why it's worth it. So this is this is what people need these days, because there's not a whole lot of role models, and the opposite, there's a lot of people who are just crash and burn and in pain and haven't figured it out, talking a lot. And then you've got the Hollywood thing. It's like, or it's amazing or it's terrible. There's also enough movies just tearing marriage apart as well. So we need to educate. I think it puts the onus on us, right? It really puts the emphasis and the responsibility on people who can represent what a good marriage is and why it's even worth it.
I like to think that I don't have a biased opinion about the traditional relationships or non-traditional relationships. But I'm going to bring two different relationships to the table. So when I work with non-monogamous couples, I find that they often want to prepare for what it would look like. So that's positive, because all those expectations and boundaries and values need to be discussed so that you know where you stand and what you can expect and what's fair to expect. Then, if you look at traditional societies, whether or not through the church you prepared for marriage, you have so many peers. If you're a woman, you have so many examples of women in your generation and previous generations. And there isn't a big difference between generations anyway. That's why we call them traditional. So that preparation is less needed. And there is homogeneity in society. So there is also less jealousy and less resentment in theory. But I suppose a lot of people think they maybe assume that they are, well, I was born in the Christian West and I don't practice, and my girlfriend is the same as me. But there's a whole lot of things they don't discuss. I suppose, where am I going with this? The moment you have non-traditional individuals, the need for preparation to me becomes more pressing.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, because the norms and the rules are not written. Okay, that doesn't mean that traditional couples don't need preparation and they don't get stuck. It's just that it's a little easier because like the realm of possibilities is smaller, whereas you have when you have non-traditional couples, the realm of possibilities is endless. Gender is not defined, relationship is not defined, commitment's not defined. I mean, so it's like anything could go, anything could happen.
Anything.
Yeah, anything, right?
Yes. I mean, maybe he turned off his dating app 3 days after this relationship became serious. And that could create trust issues for the next 10 years.
Yeah. And, like, is it okay to have a third party from the neighborhood, or is it not okay? And like, you can't think about every possible possibility. And so as much as, couples get together in a non-monogamous relationship and they try to create rules, they can't think of every possible rule. And so eventually what ends up happening often is that it's like someone does something. What do you mean? How can you do that? Well, we never said that. Yeah, but you should understand, that's the difficulty in trying to create a commitment of sorts without, ever being able to nail down enough boundaries.
Yes. I wonder whether I feel like I would like to define what preparation for marriage, to define what. So a marriage is a long-term relationship, is par excellence, is the long-term relationship that we know in the West. But let's say long-term relationship rather than marriage. What does it mean to believe in a long-term relationship? It means to go through hardship and putting the unity of the relationship before my own individual needs and wants is so tricky, because in the West, our individual values and freedoms are part and parcel of who we are in the West, and yet we have this Judeo-Christian background where you put your neighbor before you, and you believe in marriage, and a small community of marriage comes before the individual. individualism and the marriage institution.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I would say that I can't speak for the Christian perspective as much, because I have more of a background in understanding the Jewish perspective. But the goal is, it's like from the Judaic perspective, is the couple, but it's not losing the individual, which is, I think, I would imagine that's true also in Christianity. But you can't have a good couple if you don't have good individuals. You can't have a relationship if two people aren't their own person. So it's not about nullifying the individual, but I think the traditional societies, I would say Christian, Judeo-Christian, would say, well, you've got to work on both, right? Versus the individualistic perspective, which is, I don't have to be in a relationship. I don't have to ever have children. I don't like that's not, I can do whatever I want. And wherever it's about me and what makes me happy, versus there's a me and making myself happy. There's also there's also the us, and that balance between these two things. So I really believe that is any healthy relationship has to have a balance between these two things. And I think that in the individualist society, so then some people will opt not to have a long-term commitment and just do their own thing and go through life as like a solo boat, sometimes connecting with someone else, sometimes not. And that is an option that has become more and more common and popular. And then there's the traditional perspective of you are an individual, and also how do you make it work, your individuality work in the context of a relationship. So I think that anyone in a monogamous relationship, whether they're traditional or not, I mean, because you've got a lot of secular people who don't see themselves as traditional, but they do believe in monogamy. So maybe that already becomes traditional by by virtue of being older. But I think that any healthy relationship can only exist as an individual still holding on to and developing as an individual, and then in the context of the relationship learning how to be with another, and that kind of that differentiation that we talk about, not losing yourself. It's never about losing oneself, and it's about both the individual and the couple, and then the family, right?
A relationship to thrive and a family to thrive needs individuals to be thriving individuals.
Yes.
I do agree. I do agree
Yes.
with you. Thank you for bringing the happiness piece, the happiness and fulfillment of the individual. That's where it can get complicated. We talked about the contrast between the dating phase and then what real life, particularly after a baby comes along, look like, which is way less stylish. How do you give each other the benefit of the doubt, and what's fair to expect? Because I don't feel happy. That's where, what do I do with my non-happiness? At what stage do I stop believing in a long-term relationship and either cheat or separate?
Look, the first step of any kind of healthy boundaries is understanding that we're responsible for our own happiness. And so whenever people first come to me and talk about divorce, so I say, look, before you even talk about divorce, where are you at in yourself? Where are you at in your own happiness, in your own what your contribution to this marriage or lack thereof? Because sometimes a person's not happy in a marriage because they're not happy. And so then they're going to, okay, so get divorced. And then what do you got? You're going to have a little bit of time where you're happy, but then your unhappiness is still with you. So that question of, like, I'm unhappy, should I leave, it has to be really looked at as to why are you unhappy? Okay, number one. So we're responsible for our own happiness. Now, secondly, as couples therapists, we know that oftentimes people are unhappy in their marriage because of certain things they're also contributing. Okay, let's say, yes, their spouse is also doing stupid things. Okay, but we're also contributing on our end. So it's so there's, first of all, taking responsibility for our happiness. Secondly, it's, well, maybe part of what's going wrong here is me. Like, what am I? Maybe I'm not communicating. Maybe I'm avoiding conflict. Maybe I'm being aggressive. Maybe my anger is seeping out in ways that I'm not even aware of it, right? Maybe my selfishness is prevalent and I can't even see it, right? Maybe I'm lying and I'm not even realizing that I'm lying. Okay. It's like, there's so many things that
Yes.
happen.
Absolutely. I mean, if you have a therapist, particularly a good one, then you can explore all of this.
Yeah.
Like I was, but therapy is an opportunity. Is an opportunity that you are catching. Is a forum. Is a fitting forum. And then again, some wealthier part of society do it. And then again, I mean, in traditional societies, perhaps if you had you didn't talk to a therapist and perhaps talk to a peer, more often than not, that peer would have said, well, you need to stay in this marriage. And I guess these days, if you're having a chat in a cafe and you're saying, I've been feeling neglected emotionally for months or years, your friend is probably going to say, more likely to say that perhaps, you deserve better. So I agree with you. If you are in therapy, then it's more of a neutral sort of exploration.
Yes. Yeah. And it's, look, I always take on, one or two couples who can't afford therapy because, I think it's sad that, people are going to not get help because they can't afford it. So, I train therapists in a clinic where they, so those therapists are taking care of couples who can't afford therapy. But even within my own private practice, I make room for couples. But, it's sad. It's like, I always think if I was a millionaire, that's really where I would create a foundation of people who can't afford therapy to give them really good therapy, because it's sad that it would be only for people who have money. And, and the difference between good therapy and not good therapy is night and day,
I suppose for me, it's not just the financial aspect. Is also that I see my mission as a therapist to bring a neutral forum, neutral from whichever values the flavor of the month in society. Like I was saying before, your peer who said you should stay in marriage no matter what, or the other peers who said, no, you're much better than that and you should move on. Society is insidious. And it's better not to have a chat than to have a wrong chat.
100%.
And my mission is to provide an environment where you can have the right chat.
Exactly. Yes. Like someone was just telling me that she and her husband went through a huge financial struggle. And this is one of the couples I'm interviewing. And really, really, and her husband was just devastated. And the poor guy, I mean, he was ripped off. It was terrible. And he was, feeling in a mild depression. He wasn't picking himself up. And her divorce friends were like, get out. Like, what do you need that guy for? And her married friends were like, hey, he's a good guy. You have so much history. Like give him a chance. And she said she hung in there because that was her value. Her value was, I got to hang in there. And then they went to therapy and they were able to get that assistance that they needed. Right. But I think that, Francesco, I oftentimes think, are we really neutral? Meaning,
yes, good point.
We want to, at least I want to help couples trying to make it if they can. Now, have I helped couples get divorced? Yes, I have. Have I told people get out? It's crazy. Yeah, I certainly have. But those are situations where there's abuse, there's addiction, and the person's not dealing with their addiction, where there's mental illness and the person's not dealing with their mental illness. They're not taking their medication. They're not even going to speak to anybody. It's your problem that I'm depressed, So there are times to get out for sure. But, that being said, I think that we hope that a couple are going to be able to work it out. So that's already not neutral. And then sometimes a couple will come to me and I'm their fourth therapist and they say, wow, this is so refreshing because you're saying, okay, let me see how you guys can work it out. And everyone else before that was saying, oh, I don't know if you can work it out. The first thing to come out of their mouth, I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can work it out. And this is a couple who wants to work it out, but they're getting, the therapist is not neutral either, but they're on the gut, like, well, maybe you can't work it out. Like, who said you need to? Just get divorced. So I don't know. I think that we aren't human. And so as much as we're supposed to be neutral, I think that some of our values just end up coming out. And I think that's okay, as long as we're not imposing our values, but to shut ourselves down and say, like, I don't have any values, I don't think that's realistic. We do have values, and they come out in just by virtue of our presence. Our responsibility is not to impose our values on others. And if someone comes in with a situation that is too far out of our values, like, if like, I can't work with a pedophile, I can't, and I'm so glad that there are therapists who can, but it's just too far out of my values that, unless he or she wanted to change, that I could do. But if somebody's still active and not necessarily changing, or I don't think that they have the tools, the resources within to make the changes, I don't know if I could do that, especially if they don't think there's something wrong with it.
Yes, it's an ambition for me to hold some neutrality, to be neutral. But you make a good point, to be aware that that's difficult and perhaps not completely attainable is also important, to be aware of that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we have to be, real with our clients. Like, I say straight up, when people want to get divorced, they've already paid the divorce lawyers. They've already, and I say straight up, look, I believe in marriage, right? I do believe in marriage. So you have to know that sitting with me, there is that value in the room, that I do believe in marriage. Right?
Yes, your life actions were based on that belief. It's good that you are aware of it, and in this case, you even mentioned it to them, because it's a big one.
I do. Yeah, I think people know also, because I wrote books about it, that it's a little bit obvious, but I say it anyway, because it is a bias. Once you believe in marriage, or you believe in a couple trying to work it out, then that's already a bias.
This probably good place to bring it to an end, because we sort of danced around the values piece, and it's interesting that now you're describing it as our values are also our bias, and it makes me think that we seem to agree on the fact that you need to agree on some values. The whole marriage is to have that bias to think, okay, do we both believe in this or not, and what does it mean to believe in this? It gives focus.
Yeah. And I think that that's what we can do for our couples, is if they're already married and they're already committed, then we help them find the common values that they do have. If they're not yet married, then we say, hey, let's put your values out there. Let's see if you are seeing eye to eye. Now, typically, if they're not seeing eye to eye in their values, and they're not like in la la land in terms of the infatuation, so they're going to start having trouble already, because their values are going to clash while they're dating. But if there's a lot of infatuation and they're fooling around, and there's like a huge sexual component of their relationship, they can sometimes not pay attention to the fact that their values are clashing. So if a couple come into us and they're not yet married, then that's what we want to do. We want to bring okay, let's make sure you guys are on the same page here. And if they are already married, then we try to help them to find those common values and negotiate the places where they're not on the same page. And there's going to be plenty of that, like two people divergent, being two separate people, are going to have different opinions about a lot of things. So we want to help them with that.
Chana, is there anything else? Any final comments on today's discussion? Because I feel really sort of fulfilled and satisfied right now, replenished, nourished.
Such a pleasure to speak with you and to discuss these really important points, these essential life points. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Looking forward to keeping in touch.
That would be nice. Thank you, Abby. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. You too. Thank you.
Bye, Chana.